really quick questions. Do you think that Holocaust education in our schools is a DEI program? There's no card for that. That's just yes or no.
I can look at whatever card
Holocaust education, is it a DEI?
Much.
You can have a press conference to say whatever you want. I just need a quick answer to this.
Your soliloquy
is Holocaust, because this is my time, is Holocaust education a DEI program?
No.
Is African American Studies a DEI program?
I think I answered that with one
I'm
of the
asking
other
it again.
callers. Listen, we should
Just
be able,
yes or no?
We should be able to teach courses
My point is they are DEI programs, both of them, because students need diversity, equity, and inclusion to understand their environments. So both Holocaust education and the teaching of African American history are important, which is why the state of Connecticut requires it in our social studies curriculum. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You can't support one without supporting the other. And looking at what happens in the schools and actually deferring to teachers, parents who are on curriculum committees, local boards of education in states who actually do the hard work, and listening to what they say would be incredibly helpful in this role.
It's time to move on.
Because since you brought up the anti-Semitism of it all, she was pressed by a different congressperson about all the different things that you may or may not be allowed to teach in American universities. Listen to this.
Would the Harvard government department be compelled to hire faculty that believe the 2020 election was stolen?
I believe that there are rights to freedom of speech, but on campuses and universities of colleges and universities across the country, freedom of speech should be allowed.
Does refusing to hire a Holocaust denier as a member of Harvard's history department faculty count as an ideological litmus test?
I believe that there should be diversity of viewpoints relative to teachings and opinions on campuses.
A diversity of viewpoints about Holocaust denying?
That's not what she said. That's not what she said. That's not at all what just happened there.
Hold on.
She's saying that college faculty are uniformly partisan liberal, progressive radicals.
All right.
And that's
I guess let me just read again what was just said. The question, does refusing to hire a Holocaust denier as a member of Harvard's history department count as an ideological litmus test? She says, I believe there should be diversity of viewpoints relative to teachings and opinions on campus. I don't understand.
She was not answering what is a patently ridiculous question. And no Republican should take any lectures about anti-Semitism right now from Democrats.
But why on earth would she not be able to answer that question?
She has the same answer that every Republican has had for time immemorial. Why isn't there any diversity of viewpoint in a faculty at a college?
So what is the answer?
It was a joke of a question.
Okay.
It was a joke of a question.
So what's the answer?
An answer.
What's the answer?
The answer
is it an ideological litmus test to have a Holocaust denier be asked to ask?
That's not an
Is there an ideological litmus test that you have to believe in progressive radicalism to get hired now? Because that's what it seems like to us.
Holocaust denialism.
That's the box they have to check.
Which is card-carrying, textbook anti-Semitism. You
she
think
wasn't responding
doesn't
to
count?
That. She wasn't responding to that, and is a patently ridiculous assertion.
Why are you assuming that she wasn't responding to that when she gave
because
that answer?
Because I'm a thinking human being who can see what a rational person would say to a ridiculous question.
She didn't say that's a ridiculous question.
You were totally
Scott,
misconstruing this.
Scott, literally we played it for the American people to see.
Yeah, and every
hear.
Single person's going to see it my way.
She literally did not answer. She did not answer the question the way you want to answer the question, and that question has an answer. What is the answer?
The answer to that question is you're an idiot. To that congressman. That is the answer to that question.
What is the answer? Will the federal government, if somebody comes in and says, I don't believe the Holocaust really happened, will the federal government bring the hammer down on universities for saying that is not a viewpoint that we are allowing on our campuses?
The question would be
that the answer ought to be no, but it sounds like neither of you want to give an answer.
No, the answer ought to be what kind of litmus test is Harvard putting on its faculty now?
Yes.
Only 3% of its faculty are Republicans.
I mean,
she didn't have a note card in front of her to tell her the answer, and this is what happens when you have somebody who lied about having an education degree. They didn't teach about the Holocaust maybe when she was getting her French degree.
If
she actually has that.
The reality we also didn't even.
You're accusing her of being a Holocaust denier?
No. Hold on a second.
This is outrageous.
Excuse me, Scott. Stop. Everybody stop. Everybody stop for a second. Excuse me, Scott. Nobody accused her of being a Holocaust
You're
denier.
implying that
Scott,
that's what she wants.
No one did
You're
that.
implying.
It is completely.
The line of inquiry
Scott,
here
just
is an
stop for just a
implication that
second.
she's like, sure,
it is
let's do that.
completely disingenuous for you to sit at this table and say that we accused her of being a Holocaust denier.
I think it's disingenuous to portray this interaction the way you are.
Absolutely,
That's my view.
no one said that. It is
How are you portraying
disingenuous.
it? How are you portraying
It's
it?
disingenuous. It's disrespectful.
I think
wrong.
the
The question was
So,
disingenuous. though. I think
excuse me.
It was a disingenuous question from
How is
Congressman
it a
Tejano.
disingenuous question? The other part of the question is, if you are an election denier, and Harvard said you can't be an election denier and teach at this school, is that a litmus test?
The question is, what litmus test is Harvard putting on its faculty?
Okay,
We
listen,
know they have one
we gotta
set
go,
of ideology.
but it is very clear that neither of you want to answer a very simple question.
So now you're accusing us.
Are you allowed?
Are you accusing us?
Is Harvard?
Are you accusing him and me?
Is Harvard allowed, or
Go
any
ahead and do
school,
it.
is any school allowed to say that these are facts, and if you don't believe in facts, you cannot teach here? Are they allowed to do that?
The question is, what is the litmus test
Scott,
today?
don't
and what
do
kind of
not
faculty do you
answer
want?
my
do you want
question.
people who all have the same
Do
views
not,
or a
when you
diversity
answer
of
my
views?
question with a question, you are dodging.
When
so
you
answer
ask me,
the
when you ask
question.
me questions that I think are kind of ridiculous framing of this issue, then I think
How
you're
is it a
misconstruing
ridiculous
the issue.
framing?
Because
You
she-
either believe that there are things that are facts or you don't.
I do believe in facts, and I also
Okay.
believe that that member of Congress was creating a disingenuous, ridiculous question designed for this gotcha moment right here.
Okay, it is very telling that you are not able or willing to even entertain an answer. You could answer
I
the
gave you
question
an
right
answer.
now and you
has a
refuse
right-
to do it.
Wait a minute.
Look,
No, Harvard has a right to have any litmus test they want for their faculty. They're a private institution.
Okay,
They can-
all right. Well, there's the answer to your question. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that.
There are rights to freedom of speech, but on campuses and universities of colleges and universities across the country, freedom of speech should be allowed. There should be open debate. There should be different viewpoints.
But this is, I'm not asking you a question about
There
freedom of
should be
speech here,
different
Madam Secretary.
viewpoints.
I'm asking you about the limits of viewpoint diversity cited in this letter. You demand that Harvard would be compelled to hire faculty. I mean, well, you're saying that there has to be viewpoint diversity. I'm just asking you, would the government department be compelled to hire faculty that believe the 2020 election was stolen? As an example of viewpoint diversity.
However, one of the things that Harvard Crimson, and by its
Okay,
own
I think you don't really have an answer, so I'm going to move on to other
3% of
questions. Maybe we can
conservative
clarify by the
professors-
questions. Would viewpoint
well, you're not
diversity
allowing
mean,
me to
for
answer the
example,
question. If you
Madam
wanna
Secretary,
know the
reclaiming my
answer,
time, reclaiming
you
my
wanna
time.
know what my
Reclaiming my
response
time,
is?
Madam Secretary.
Okay, well, you go
Gentleman
ahead.
Secretary, would the Harvard Medical School, who is looking to hire an immunologist, would that person need to adhere to HHS Secretary Kennedy's view on the efficacy of vaccines?
Listen, we all know that we should have our universities look at what all the programs
I don't think
are.
you
and
really
the
thought through this
political
this
the political
viewpoint diversity
ideology
issue.
that you're trying to put forth is a false narrative.
Okay.
And the funding is a privilege.
Madam Secretary,
It's not a right.
reclaim my time. Does refusing to hire a Holocaust denier as a member of Harvard's history department faculty count as an ideological litmus test?
I believe that there should be diversity of viewpoints relative to teachings and opinions on campuses.
Well, what about this situation of Harvard's history department, and they're looking for another department member? Would being a Holocaust denier count
Well, I do
as
know that Harvard did replace its head of Middle Eastern Studies even before we looked at it because they believed that they needed to make
Okay.
changes already.
Okay.